You know, someone who's perhaps not so sympathetic to those individual investors, maybe seeing the institutional investor side, is Per Wimmer, who is the CEO of Wimmer Financial. Good to have you with us, Per. Let's get your thoughts on JP Morgan. It's desperate, isn't it, to regain trust in the market? It's been slapped about a bit, hasn't it?
Absolutely. JP Morgan was, during the credit boom and bust, was one of the few banks that actually escaped untouched, as it were. They could almost walk on water. And suddenly it seems like everything is just hitting them now. The London whale scandal, and now which was, just to remind our viewers, which was a big trading scandal here in London, where they did things they were not allowed to. And now suddenly the whole subprime mortgage scandal is hitting them. So it all totals up to about 20 billion if you add it up. And you can say, for you and I, that's a lot of money. But what does it mean for a big bank like JP Morgan? Well, it's the equivalent of about last year's earnings, essentially. So it is meaningful numbers even for a bank of that scale.
And yet, I was just talking about this earlier in World Business Report, it's still staggering to remember that within the whole unravelling of this scandal about mortgage-backed securities and things, no one's faced any criminal charges anywhere. And we are talking about massive amounts of money here.
Absolutely, and one shouldn't rule that out. But what has happened on the slightly softer side of things, for what it's worth, is that the CEO, Jamie Dimon, has been sort of downgraded. When they used to have the bankers get together with the president in DC, Jamie was always sitting very close to the president, so they could have a casual chat. Now he's a little bit further down the
corner somewhere.
Yeah, so the signal is there.
Yeah. It's interesting because on June the 20th, Mr. Dimon and other top executives on the bank's operating committee, there was an internal email, and this is what the Wall Street Journal picks out. Building and maintaining an open and transparent culture with our regulators and ensuring that we are responsive and that the information we provide them is accurate, complete and accurate at all times is critical. Regulators perhaps don't believe that's quite what has happened. We were talking about the rift in politics in the United States. The International New York Times is saying that the battle lines drawn as the crisis exposes the Republican rifts. Is it all on that side?
I think the whole of Congress is to blame, to be honest. It seems to be increasingly sort of little kindergarten or playground. But it comes down to how the US system is constructed, and that's really the arm they have to fight back the president when there's stuff they don't like. So, but clearly the Republican Party has had a lot of internal problems in this regard, because there's really some quite on the right side who don't want to see this happening. And for now, we've just bought a little bit of time.
You've used the term kindergarten. I mean, obviously, nursery school, as we would say in the UK. The UK has a coalition government, yet we've never been pushed, or we've not seen it being pushed so far as to where it damages the economy. Is that because the UK government is a little bit more grown up, or the politicians are more grown up, or behaving more like adults, or is it the system?
Well, if you looked at Prime Minister's questions time, I'm not quite sure. That's usually quite entertaining to watch. I think in the US, what the difference is there is that there's this political game and positioning going on. At the end of the day, as a financial market observers, we sort of look at a little bit with entertainment interest, but it's more of a short-term issue. I don't think that we'll see a situation where the US government doesn't pay their bills. That's not expected. So we all expect that issues like that will get sorted out and we all move on.
I mean, everyone that we spoke to just kept saying, we just can't believe it got to this stage.
And Alan Greenspan, former Federal Reserve chief, is now saying that it could happen again. Don't be surprised if it happens again.
Kicking that can down the road, the famous expression. The Daily Telegraph here in the UK, it's got a story on its front page talking about MI6, sort of international spy agency, wanting to have more spies on the ground in Afghanistan to fight terror, which is ironic because that's the whole reason we went into Afghanistan in the first place.
Absolutely, and I think the interesting part of that story is, why is it there in the first place? These sort of budget negotiations usually takes place behind closed curtains. So it looks to me like MI6 is probably under a little bit of pressure in those negotiations, where the ministers have said, once we leave in December 2014, we're going to pull out a lot of our resources. They clearly think that there are some real security issues here that will affect the British national interest, and therefore they got to stick around and they got to have the money to do so. And those negotiations are taking place at the end of this year. So therefore, it's quite timely that they put it out. But what is surprising is that they put it out so publicly.
Well, yes, because the ministers are insisting that the Afghan forces are up to the task. So there's obviously a battle, isn't there, between MI6 and the ministers. Now, look, what do you make of the Royal Mail sale? Because there's been a lot of controversy. To explain to our viewers, Royal Mail was privatised. Shares were offered. Lots of individual investors, Joe Bloggs, you, me, could have gone out, not you in your working capacity, but us in our personal capacity, could have applied for shares. We didn't get as many as we wanted, or the public didn't, and the institutional investors were favoured. And it seems the FT is saying that this is going to be David Cameron's aim, particularly when we see Lloyd's privatised again.
Absolutely. I think a lot of retail investors did gain, from their allocations. The ones that really got left out was people asking for more than £10,000 of allocations because they got zeroed. So they were the ones who really lost out in this. The institutions.
Is it fair? Is it the way to go?
It's probably, given the politics around a public sale like this from the government, it's probably a sensible way of doing it.
Why?
But the government can't win in this. It's very difficult because if they sell it too cheaply and it goes up too much, then some of the investors will have the sense that they've lost out. If the retail investors don't get any allocations, they would have lost out on it. If they do get a lot of allocation, stock goes down, then they'll be blamed as well. So it's a very tricky position both from a banker's point of view. How do you value the Royal Mail, and how do you allocate this? But I think net, they did a pretty good job in this.
Well, it's definitely going to be, I think, the way forward. The Guardian newspaper, another question, do you think this is the way forward? We're going to see Britain's first new nuclear power station being built for several years, but in partnership with the French and the Chinese.
Well, I'm just putting the finishing touches on my next book called The Green Bubble, which is about green energy in the future, how to go about carbon emissions, etc. One of the key conclusions is you cannot live without nuclear. All these solar and wind, etc., great as it might be, it is still very small, and you do need baseload power. So you cannot live without nuclear. It is
even
part of the
though other
green
countries
mix.
are phasing it out.
Absolutely,
France,
that's interesting.
Germany, Italy.
Britain is moving in the opposite direction, and with this new power station being built, it's going to be about 7% of the UK's power needs that's being covered there. So it's a lot of megawatts for the buck, but it does come with a price. And in these days, it's quite politically sensitive about the rise of the energy prices. Everybody has got their opinions about it, and we all feel the heat. But unfortunately, we are consuming more energy, and it needs to come from somewhere. And the best way to subsidize it is probably through some sort of feed-in tariffs or guaranteed price tariffs by the government, and that's exactly what they're doing there.
Doesn't sit comfortably with many people, though, when they hear the word nuclear, does it? It's quite a thing to convince the public.
That's correct, but things have changed. If you look at the actual track record on safety, blowouts and things like that, it is actually pretty good, and it has gotten a lot better over the years.
Per, always good having you with us. Thanks very much for your views on the papers. Thanks. Alice and I will see you very soon.
See you soon.